Good day and welcome to This Week in Government. This week we're delighted to have the Privacy Commissioner, Alexander White, with us to discuss the 2025 looming, I shouldn't say looming, should I? Privacy Information Protection Act, or PIPA. Yes. That's right. Mr. White, it's good to have you here with us. You've been now in the role, even though this is getting, PIPA rolls out in January 2025?
That's right.
That's correct. You've been in the role, though. You've been here in Bermuda for a while. Yeah, when did you arrive and how long have you been in the position as Privacy Commissioner?
Yeah, I started in January 2020, and so I think a lot of us, our 2020 plans did not go quite like we expected, exactly. And so we had to adjust the timetable for bringing PIPA into effect. But in some ways it's been really nice because we've been able to spend more time getting out in the community, getting to know people, getting to work with different stakeholder groups and helping to raise awareness about these issues and doing things like this.
Right, right. So you've been doing a lot of grassroots, going out and meeting with businesses, community groups and so forth. And okay, that's good.
That's right.
Tell us what is the, no, I'm going to do it again, Personal Information Protection Act. PIPA, yes. What is it? What's the principle behind it?
So PIPA is a law that it creates a set of rights for individuals and obligations, compliance obligations for organizations. And a lot of people ask me, well, why are we doing this? Why are we going to all of this trouble? And the reality is that pretty much everything we do in our lives nowadays uses personal information in some way. A lot of decisions are getting made about, whether we qualify for a loan or what type of health care treatments we're getting or what have you. All of that's being done using personal information. And so there have to be some rules about what organizations have to do or what they're prohibited from doing with that personal information.
Mm-hmm. And when you say organizations, what are you talking about? I mean, businesses, schools, what do you say that?
Yeah, PIPA defines organizations very broadly. So it applies to any organization that's in Bermuda, and that could be a large, multinational organization, or it could be a small kind of mom and pop shop. And so it doesn't really matter the size of the organization, but what matters is whether they're using personal information or not.
Mm-hmm. And is that how your role comes in as the Commission's office and the Commissioner is making sure that the legislation's in place? Is the legislation in place yet? Or?
So the legislation was passed in 2016. It got royal assent in 2016. And the minister has announced that the implementation date will be January 1st, 2025.
Okay. So then your office, like you said, is responsible for letting everybody, all these different businesses, community, everyone know what we're talking about and how to use personal data. Will your office then be responsible for not only the implementation, but once it's implemented, if there's disputes or, okay.
That's right, yeah. So on the front end, we want to try to avoid those sorts of things happening by giving guidance about the right way to go about this stuff. We were just talking about the fact that there's so many different types of organizations. The fact of the matter is we can't create a rule book that simply says, here's the rules for everybody. Everybody just do this and you'll be fine. Because there's so many different use cases. Sometimes people are just keeping a name and a phone number in an address book, in their home. And that is not an especially risky activity or thing to do. So PIPA says that organizations have to consider the risk of harm to the individual. And so we're helping to create guidance about what that means for different types of harms in different contexts. So that's on the front end. But then on the back end, if an individual does feel like an organization has used their information inappropriately or in a way that's against the act, they can make a complaint to our office.
Okay. What does this look like for the average person? What will 2025 look like for the individual first, the protection of our privacy, and then what will it look like for a small business? Let's say a small business.
Yeah, so the average Bermudian is probably going to get a lot of explanations for how data is being used from organizations, having new privacy notices, as they're called, saying, hey, here's what information we have, here's who we share it with, here's what we're planning on doing with it. So I imagine at the beginning of 2025, there's going to be a lot of that happening and people having to make this kind of decisions.
Like when they go into a place or on a website or go ahead.
It depends. PIPA just says that the notice has to be appropriate. And so because, like we were saying, there's so many different use cases, it might make sense to do it different ways. A lot of people are going to do it on websites. That's pretty much the default around the world. But if an organization doesn't use a website, or if it's just a roadside cookie stand that's selling tea and biscuits or what have you, then they may not make sense for them to do that on a website, and then they could have something posted. So it just depends on the context.
Okay. So I go to the doctor's office. What can I expect now, as of 2025?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as of 2025, what you'll probably see is some form of privacy notice explaining what information they collect, who they share it with, how to get in touch with them if you wanted more information, and other details like that. But that's the case with every organization. Okay. So it's important to think about it in the health context because that's some sensitive information. But every organization has to have that sort of notice and explanation to the public about what's happening.
Okay. It's really fascinating because, like you said, the harm that could come from just putting out this information. We never really looked at it in terms of that until, like you said, especially in the United States. I remember being there at the time when HIPAA came in. And it was very much, you've got to understand where your data, what happens if you feel that your data is compromised? Is that when they contact the office?
Well, the first thing we want people to understand is that they have a right to go to an organization. So one of the jokes I like to make is that PIPA didn't create one regulator, it actually created 60,000 regulators because it gave every individual the ability to go to an organization and say, I want to understand what data you have on me. I want to make sure it's accurate, or I want to request that you correct it if it's not accurate. So the first step is always to go directly to the organization. But then if the individual feels that their request was not handled properly, they can ask our office to review. And if there's the potential that there's a non-compliance, then we can conduct an investigation and even issue an order instructing the organization how to get back into compliance.
Okay. And PrivCom.
PrivCom is that's our office nickname.
Okay. So that's the nickname for the office.
Yeah.
Okay,
so you might hear us say that sometimes we talk about PrivCom. I tried to avoid doing yet another acronym.
Yeah. Have you issued a guidance? I do believe you issued a guidance on what is the privacy program, and where is that? Go ahead.
Yes, so on privacy.bm, which is our website, we have a lot of guidance. So we've got that one you were just talking about, saying what is a privacy program. Another aspect of PIPA is that organizations have to designate a privacy officer who's responsible for the privacy program. And so we've got a guidance that says, what is a privacy officer? We wanted to make this stuff easy to find. So you can just go to the search bar and type, what is a privacy officer? And it will pop up there.
Is that, now, would they have to hire someone with a background in compliance? I mean, I can't see a small business. I'm immediately thinking of a small business, hiring somebody for compliance?
Well, the same way a small business might not have a formal compliance officer who does that 40 hours a week, every week, but they still are responsible for compliance, whether that's compliance with credit card processing or whatever the case it may be. And so in a similar way, they have to designate someone as their privacy officer, and that's the person that receives these sorts of information requests that we're talking about. So it could be the small business owner, and the contact information is simply their normal customer service line. That's a perfectly acceptable way to do it, as long as it can be effective for individuals to use.
Okay. And I'm still going to the small businessman, right? So no longer can they just take your information and throw it out in the trash. Is there a way you have to dispose of this information now?
Well, there's a joke that every question you ask a lawyer, they always say it depends, and so this is very much the case here too, because it depends. It depends on what the information is in the context. So the example that I often use is that if you just have someone's name and their address, perhaps that's not an especially sensitive piece of information. But if it's on a piece of paper and at the top it says recent bankruptcy declarations, or this person tested positive for Ebola, or whatever the case may be, then it becomes a much more sensitive piece of information. So in some cases, just crumpling it up and throwing it away is fine because there's not a risk of harm. In other cases, they may need to shred it or to do some other practice.
Okay. I remember I'm going back to my days of living in the United States, and I remember Social Security numbers, where we don't have them here in Bermuda. But it was if I remember companies being hacked and their Social Security numbers are gone and all this information is lost. While we don't have Social Security numbers here, what is the thing that we should make sure that what do I need to really make sure someone absolutely destroys my information or keeps my information confident? Go ahead.
Well, if the individual themselves would want to be thinking about, well, what could someone use that information for? And one of the common risks that any typical person might face is financial identity theft. And so anything that could be used for financial identity theft is probably something they want to be aware of, whether that's bank account numbers or certainly login information or one of the, even the little devices that you use to punch in your code, that could be something that you want to make sure is destroyed or returned appropriately because it could be used to access your finances.
Good. And that's applicable for us here in Bermuda, very much so. All right, Mr. White, we're going to be right back with the Privacy Commissioner right after these messages.
Bermuda is embarking on a journey to become a leader in zero-emission transportation in the region. The Ministry of Transport is inviting all Bermudians to be a part of this historic transition.
I would recommend persons to purchase electric bikes. Great advantages over gas bikes. Actually, I was tired of paying the price for fuel. I'm plugging in maybe twice a week, and I personally haven't seen any jump in my electricity bill. It's a nice little ride, and I get to hear the birds chirping, there's no sound.
Want to learn more about the policy? Then please visit www.forum.gov.bm.
This has been a message from the government of Bermuda.
And we're back with the Privacy Commissioner, Alexander White, who's been at this now 4 years, but the implementation takes place in January 2025. We are going to be under new PIPA legislation and policy and rules and procedures. Right. There we go. There we go. Tell us about the road to PIPA. What's being implemented? What's going?
Yes. Well, you mentioned January 2025, but we don't want people waiting until December in order to get started. And so we have created a roadmap for organizations to get ready for PIPA. This isn't the type of thing that they can just suddenly flip a switch, because there's so many steps that go into understanding, okay, well, where do we store files, either electronically or digital or in paper form, just where are they? What do we do with them? Who has access to them? All of those sorts of steps. And so the road to PIPA is designed to put that into bite-sized chunks. So people are not having to take take on all of this at once, but each week there's going to be some specific activity that they can take on. There's going to be guidance and templates for that specific activity. And so we just started it at the end of January. It's certainly not too late for anyone to take a look if you're looking to get your organization ready. And we have all of our steps archived on our website as well. Okay. So you can see not just everything that you need to do, but how to do it.
Okay. Okay, making it user friendly.
That's right.
For I keep going back to my small business.
That's right.
And my mid-sized businesses.
Yeah.
They can go to the website.
Well, and I was just going to say the fact is that even a small business could potentially use a lot of personal information. You know, a single person could be sitting in their living room and they could create an app that everyone in Bermuda could download on their phone, and then all of a sudden they've got the location of everyone in Bermuda all the time. Yeah. And so even a single person could have a lot of sensitive information. So size isn't the only factor, but we know that a lot of people can't throw a whole compliance team at this, and we need to make sure it's approachable in that way.
Yeah, it's good, because all of a sudden I was thinking about, there's food delivery places. How much information that they have.
They certainly do.
Yeah.
I don't want them to know how much I get fried chicken. So
yeah.
I don't want everybody to know
I don't need everyone to know my business about that. So the Road to Piper, how many people are in your unit then?
Yeah, we have an office of 14 full-time employees, which for our size, for the jurisdiction size of Bermuda, is a healthy size. And so we're working hard every day on developing the guidance that we've been talking about and getting our investigations procedures ready for 2025, and also developing guidance that people can be on the lookout for what it means for individuals, you know, explaining these rights and how they can exercise these rights and what their expectations should be.
The other group that we didn't talk about, we talked about small businesses, larger businesses, compliance, privacy officer, you said. What about in government? What will we see now from government? Because government has a lot of our information. What will we see from government side now that the Piper is in place? So when I go to register my car or something like that, go ahead, tell me.
In some ways, less will change for government than for other organizations, because a lot of the rights that people have under PIPA already existed under PATI, where they could request their own information. The difference is that with PIPA coming into effect, there are some more specifics about what organizations have to do. And so basically, if an individual wants to request their own information from government, they would use PIPA, versus requesting some other type of information, they would use PATI. But one of the things we're trying to do is to an extent make that invisible to the average person, because they shouldn't be confused about, do I send it to this email or that email? We should try to simplify it as much as possible.
So personal information, and where's my personal information going? I have the right to ask. 2025, I have the right to ask, how are you using my personal information? I can expect that the business will tell me how they will use my personal information. And if I have a problem, I will go back to the business and I'll say, tell me. If they then don't tell me, then I'm back at the Privacy Commissioner's office.
That's right.
Saying, I want to know where my information is going and how you're using my information. What about selling information? You know how they sell? One service sells to another service. Go ahead.
PIPA defines use of information really broadly. So anything that they could be doing with information is considered using. So even selling information is considered using. So if an organization is going to sell it, just like any other use of information, they have to tell the individual and explain to them, well, here's who we would disclose it to, and here's where they're located. And so it can create that transparency so people can figure out what's happening in that web
of information. So PATI is, and just let's say it, even though we don't want to confuse people, but let me just say it again. PATI is
the Public Access to Information Act.
That's when you want information about something that's going on within government.
like a government office's budget information, or information about the decisions that they're making. Anything that has a legitimate public purpose it would be available under PADI. And sometimes that includes personal information. So things like contracts or salaries, that there's a certain amount of transparency that we have to have. And that's something I really want to emphasize with PIPA and privacy rules. It's not saying that we can never use personal information. There's lots of good reasons to use personal information, and people don't have an absolute right to say, I want you to stop, I want you to delete it, because sometimes there's lawful reasons that organizations have to have personal information.
This is going to be an interesting time. This is going to be an interesting time. Government departments, you say, are already pretty much compliant with that, with the use of personal information?
Well, I hesitate to say that because I have not gone in and audited all the government departments. But what I would say is that they're familiar with these sorts of requests because it's very similar to a PADI request in that way. Whereas a lot of private organizations have never even had to approach a process like that.
Yeah, and will government departments be required to have a privacy officer?
Yes, they will.
Wow, every government department?
Well, that depends on how the government chooses to structure it, because the PIPA says that every organization has to have a privacy officer, but multiple organizations could have a single privacy officer as well. So even small businesses or a group of small businesses could get together and say, oh, we're going to make this person our privacy officer to manage all of this for us.
So is the introduction of PIPA bringing in the opportunity for more careers in compliance?
I think so. I think it definitely is.
Yeah, it sounds like
that's something that we've tried really hard to help train the local community on and do lots of sessions about what a privacy program actually looks like. In many ways, it's similar to traditional compliance work. It's a very specific type of risk assessments that people are doing. But I think this is a tremendous opportunity for Bermudians if they wanted to get into a new field that is in many ways the crest of the wave. And not only would it be very useful here in our local community, but because privacy laws around the world are generally very similar, they could work with organizations anywhere in the world.
It looks like there's more opportunity coming in that area as a result of PIPA coming into effect. So I understand that you were hosting the 45th Global Privacy Assembly. Yes?
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that.
Huge honor to do that.
Yeah.
So what this is the group of all of the privacy commissioners in the world. And so there's over 150 members, and a lot of them were here in Bermuda last October, and we were able to have discussions about how privacy can be kind of different in small jurisdictions. We all know each other so well, or we've grown up together, or things like that. So it's not the same as walking down the street in London or New York in that sense. And so we have to think about privacy in a slightly different way. But also the harms of privacy can be even worse because of the small nature of our community.
Yeah, yeah, we do all kind of know each other. We kind of share information, and it's a whole new era coming in.
Yeah.
Should people be nervous about it? How should people be preparing themselves for it? I know there might be some anxiety around, oh my God, I've got to get my business in shape. I've got to watch what's happening with my information. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say from a business perspective, this is the type of thing that is just good business. It just makes sense. The same way if you had a bunch of computers or laptops, it would be a good idea in general to know where they are and to know that they're secured or they're in a locked closet or what have you. Well, information is an asset, just like that. And so it's so important for businesses to understand how they can use that asset in an appropriate way. And from an individual perspective, I hope people are not anxious, but I hope they feel empowered about the whole thing. That's really what it is. It's empowering individuals to understand more about how individuals are using their information and making sure they do it properly.
Absolutely. I mean, on the websites now, so we can expect to see these notices on the websites, how your information is being used. We can expect to see it when we're at the doctor's office, we go into a lawyer's office, and we expect someone to be able to say, look, this is how we're going to be doing it.
And not only expect it, but if you don't see it, you can ask for it.
Yeah.
And the expectation is that it will be provided.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. We're running out of time, but I want to just lead up to it and lead as we close out. The website, give me that website information and remind me, you said there is information there for individuals as well as for organizations to prepare. Go ahead.
So our website's privacy.bm, and I will confess right now the website is a little bit more slanted towards organizations to help them get ready, because that tends to take a little bit longer, and we wanted people to start right away and not wait until later. As the year goes on, there will be more explanations of the individual rights and how individuals can exercise those rights. But for now, I strongly recommend everybody take a look at privacy.bm. We have templates and guidance and a guide to PIPA that goes through every section with examples and breaks down case studies and things like that. So we're very proud of the resources that we've put out.
Excellent. To you and your team, all the best.
Thank you very much.
As you will march towards 2020, January 2025.
All of us together.
All of us
on the road to PIPA.
On the road to PIPA.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. Privacy Commissioner Alexander White, we thank you for joining us for This Week in Government.